I want to suggest to you something to read. I just sort of rediscovered it a couple weeks ago. It's a book by Guy Davenport called The Geography of the Imagination. It's a book of 40 essays. It's incredible. It's incredible. You've got to read it. Okay, now let's begin. Questions? Please.
So, do you feel that creative nonfiction is an illegitimate form of writing, or what's your take generally on creative nonfiction?
I suppose I do feel that way, yeah. I probably shouldn't. It's probably small-minded of me. But I suppose it has a lot to do with some of the people who are pushing it.
Well, I mean, is there a subject matter that is unsettling for you, or do you think that, do you think that the genre itself doesn't have a place in the canon of
Well, I think it's just fiction. I don't know why they want to make a separate genre. Well, maybe that's all right. Maybe a separate genre is okay. You got to remember, I'm an old person. And old people get conservative and sometimes feisty about things. You can pursue that, Joy.
I just want to know how what your thoughts were on the subject. Yeah, I mean, are there any particular authors that you've read that write quote unquote creative nonfiction that rub you the wrong way, or?
Just I edited what used to be a pretty good literary magazine for more than 30 years. And I read all the prose that came in. I didn't have readers. I probably read between 3,000 and 4,000 short stories in any given year. And I probably read between 1,000 and 2,000 nonfiction pieces. Most of them were journalism, or what used to be called journalism. The ones that departed from fact, it seemed to me, had to be fiction. You know, in my head, that's it, fact, fiction. It's true, it's not. So I guess that's the basis of my bias.
Now, in that same vein, do you feel that the memoir does not have a place in journalism?
Nothing wrong with a memoir. But why does it have to be creative nonfiction? You know, memoir is biography, autobiography. I have no complaint with that.
I mean, a lot of people, as of late, have conflated the two, memoir and creative nonfiction.
Obviously, everybody's memory is somehow defective. I would forgive honest mistakes. You know, if your wife says to you, you know, that didn't really happen that way, you have to say, forgive me. That's the way I remember. Yeah.
Robbie, can you talk about during your time as an editor, like what made you pick a piece of fiction, like what made you decide to publish something? Can you tell us a little bit about just like what you looked for in a piece?
You all like this. Gut reaction. I was never looking for something in particular, but I knew when I saw it that, oh my God, that's what I've been looking for all this time. So that when a story came, when George V. Higgins first sent us a section from the book that eventually became The Friends of Eddie Coyle, way, way back. This is terrific. And Higgins himself was terrific because he stayed with us. He was a success with Eddie Coyle. There was a movie made out of it. He published a number of terrific crime novels set in the Boston area. And his agent sent me a story. And she said, George tells me what you pay, and I don't know why I'm doing this, but he told me to send it to you, which I appreciate. Same with Tom Boyle. We published T.C. Boyle's very first story, and he continued to send us stories after he was a success. And he's a friend. He's not a great friend because he's so far away. The distance between Florida and California is considerable, both in terms of geography and, I guess, philosophy. But you know it when you read it. You know when that voice speaks to you in the very beginning. You say, my God, this person, I trust this person. I'm going to read the story all the way through. Most stories you read one page. That's all you need. But to get a story whose voice speaks to you, it's a good thrill. You never get tired of it. Yeah.
Don said that your editing style was to leave mistakes in. So when you trust an author, how do you edit?
Really hearing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
My hearing is not the greatest.
I'll speak up. When you trust an author of a piece, how do you edit it?
I very rarely did any editing in fiction. If I liked it, I liked it. If I started screwing around with it somehow, I was afraid I'd mess it up. I learned very early. God, I forget names. It's very annoying. An author who became very well known and very successful, wrote bestsellers, sent me a story. And I didn't think it was punctuated properly. I didn't think he was using commas in the right way. And I said I wanted it, but I wanted to make some changes, and I sent the manuscript back to him with my changes. He, of course, sent me a scathing letter. Don't screw around with my punctuation. You know. And so ever after, very rarely did I ask an author to make a change in a story that I really liked. And only once did I have a really long-term argument with an author about the ending of the story. I could see the perfect ending to the story, and he'd missed it. And I said, you know, don't you see it should be this way? And he said, no, I don't see that. I thought, okay, he doesn't see it. I'm going to print it anyway. Let him live with it. You know, someday somebody will say to him, you know, that story, there's something wrong in the ending. I was giving a reading at Grinnell College in Iowa once. And I read a story that had already been published. And a guy in the audience who was teaching creative writing at Grinnell said to me, well, don't you think the ending would have been different if, instead of him leaving in the pickup truck, he left in the bus? Because it rounds out the story. And I thought, I wish I'd thought of it. So when I got published in book form, his change got in. But generally, you don't edit fiction, except for grammar, spelling, you know, stuff that copy editors do. Yeah. Well, I don't mean to go on so long about that. What else? I really know more than you think I do, so you can ask.
What is the most memorable story you've ever read?
The most memorable story
That you've ever read?
that I've ever read. Oh, God. It's really impossible, isn't it? I think of long stories like Somerset's Somerset Mom's The Letter. You know The Letter? God, what a story. Do you know, what's the story by William Carlos Williams about the child?
The use of force.
Use of force. It's a knockout story. Hawthorne's Rappaccini's Daughter. Wow. I lived in Nathaniel Hawthorne's dormitory when I was at school. Speaking of hoping that things will rub off. The idea that Hawthorne and Longfellow were classmates at Bowdoin and didn't know each other kills me. Didn't know each other until after they both graduated. Yeah.
How would you differentiate between commercial and literary? Right.
Again.
Would you differentiate between commercial and literary? Right. Do you like say, okay, the review is a literary review, or is it just like the story?
There's obviously a difference. I suppose if it sells, it's commercial. You know, someone once asked Margaret Bell, what's the difference between a good poem and a bad poem? Margaret said, bad poem stinks. I don't know. The publishing world is changing so drastically. I don't know how, there'll come a time when you won't be able to tell the difference between 50 Shades of Grey and Naked and the Dead. I don't know. It's a crazy world. Anybody can publish, and they can call their fiction whatever they want. They can say, this is literary. Believe it or else. Yeah.
What's your opinion on like approaching writing workshops? I mean, like where do you like going
You're
into?
going to have to speak up.
Oh, sorry. What's your opinion on like approaching writing workshops and knowing kind of where to stand with your writing and say, well, this is what my writing is, and where to take away from what other people say concerning changing your writing and editing it?
Talking when your fellow students are criticizing you?
Or just anyone, students, teachers.
Well, the writer is the final arbiter, obviously. If I understand the question, should you be somehow swayed by what other people think?
I mean, obviously if you're going into a workshop, you're going there for help with your writing, but how do you know what is actually good for your writing and what's just going to change it?
Well, of course, one of the reasons you're going into a workshop is because you're going to be doing something that everybody else is doing, so none of you feel stupid or weird, right? It's not like when you're in high school and you're a writer and your classmates are jocks and cheerleaders and stuff, so you feel somehow different from them. You go to a workshop so you won't feel different, so you can concentrate on what you want to do and not what other people think of you. And I think, you know, in the 2 years of most workshops, things sort of settle out. That between your so-called peers, who may or may not understand what the hell you're trying to do, and the instructor, depending how good he or she is, you'll get a sense of as Tom Boyle said, if Cheever liked his stuff, he felt he was going in the right direction. But not only, obviously, because I don't think Cheever would understand a lot of stuff that Tom does nowadays. In the end, it all works out. If you want to be a writer, you're going to be a writer. And you're going to be the kind of writer that you're equipped to be. And, devil take the hindmost. And it may take a while. Most of the people in writers' workshops aren't going to get rich. Most of them are going to go out and damage other writers by going to inferior workshops to teach. There are too many workshops. There are too many writers. Or too many people who pretend to be writers, or act as if they're writers. And alas, it can be encouraged by the internet, because anybody can publish a book. Great. I used to wish I'd been born 20 years earlier, so I could have matured in the age of Dos Passos and Fitzgerald and Hemingway, when there were editors like William Maxwell and who was Thomas Wolfe's editor?
Perkins. Maxwell Perkins.
Perkins, that's right. What did I say, Maxwell? Yeah. It seems to me those would have been the days when editors would write you a checks because you feed yourself while you finished your book, right? Who would do that nowadays? Are you kidding me? You have to be a celebrity. And then we'll give you a check. Yeah.
Your latest collection of short stories, Who Will Hear Your Secrets, did you approach the book with a theme in mind for the short stories? Did you write the stories together, or did you just have these short stories kind of laying around separately?
I think these short stories need to be collected someplace. Yeah.
And so you just assembled them by a common theme, or just kind of threw them all together?
I don't know how one puts together a book of short stories. And yet I've done 6 of them. And the only one that was published by a major publisher was the 3rd one, called Terrible Kisses. And Terrible Kisses, under a different title, had been turned down by a dozen publishers. This is back in the days when I actually had an agent. As soon as I changed the title, Terrible Kisses, Simon & Schuster, crazy. Why should a title be that important? And it's, it's a pretty obvious story, too.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Oh, I was going to ask one. Okay. So I was really impressed in the excerpts that you read from your story in the way that you built some tension into the description of this school, which I think derives a little bit from the different groups and how they view the school. Do you sort of intentionally think about using descriptions of place to advance the plot, or is that...
Let me have that last sentence again.
Okay. Do you sort of think about using place or, in a way to advance the plot when you're writing?
I think in that story I did, because I didn't really know where I was going to go with it. I just remembered that school from my adolescence, actually, and the divisions in the town between Protestant and Catholic, and in the case of that town, between English speakers and French-Canadian speakers, and between the white-collar Protestants and the blue-collar Catholics who worked in the textile mills, in the shoe factories. All of that gone, of course. All of that first went to the south, South Carolina, Alabama, places like that, where the labor was cheaper, which are now in China, Malaysia, Timbuktu, God knows where. I came up here yesterday, and I picked this book up off the shelf, this new Dave Eggers book, Hologram for the King, and I started reading it, and I read some more of it today. And it turns on those changes in American capitalism with America becoming a software state and all the jobs are elsewhere. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating book. Unless I can steal it here, I'm going to have to buy it. Yeah, in the case of that story, it was just a compost heap for the characters and actions that happened. Because the center of the story is a guy who's teaching in this Catholic school, and he's a lapsed Catholic. He no longer believes in all that stuff. And one of his colleagues is a nun who very much does believe in that stuff. And they share a student who gets into difficulties. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s. She has to have an abortion. And he, the lapsed Catholic, is somehow a part of the conspiracy that gets her an abortion, gets her driven to Boston, Michigan, an abortion. Against the horror that the nun feels, that this young woman has compromised herself in the eyes of God. Yeah. But I think even when you set up something like that, you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't really know how far it's going to go.
Thanks, Rob.
Are we happy? I probably had more fun than you.
We have his book for sale in the back and a wine sign. I hope you all stick around and ask him the questions you were too shy to ask in front of an audience. Thanks.